life is that people always want a formula, a quick solution to whatever problems we have. So let's think about this. When you break your arms, for those of you that have ever broken your arm, or when you injure yourself, or when you are in a car accident, it happens like this, instantaneously, quickly. And that's why we call many of those things accidents, because it happens when we didn't plan on those things to happen. The frustrating thing about accidents is that it happens quickly, and then it takes some time to recover. Some cases it'll take weeks, months, and even years to recover. I've had a few operations in my life, shoulders, both of them. I had an ankle operation. And it took time for me to get to the point where I went to the doctors and said, I now need help. But then what frustrated me was that, excuse me, in all of the cases, it took at least 18 months for things to recover. Why do I mention this? Because the art of focus is not about when things happen. It's about focusing when life is good. And that's what we need to do. So, I'm not going to offer you quick. I'm a father, and thank God, of 2 beautiful daughters and a son. And one of the things that used to frustrate me quite a lot was when they asked me this on a Friday evening, can you quickly take me to this person? And I always used to say to them, there's nothing quick. Nothing happens quickly. And then later on, they got their own cars, and it was payback time. So I would say to them, can you please quickly go here and quickly do that? Today, my daughters will tell you, there is no such a thing as quick. Surviving a pandemic, the art of focus. I entered the workplace in 1987, and I had to go and calculate that. That's 34 years ago. And since then, we have survived 4 massively disruptive events. The first was the Gulf War in 1990, 1991. Now, I'm giving away my age, and some of you won't even know what I'm talking about. The second one was the Asian crisis in 1997, and then probably all of us remember 9/11 in 2001, when the Twin Towers in New York were hit by planes. And the last one was the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. The interesting thing about those events is that at the time, they were unbelievably difficult and challenging. But today, when we look back, the world is in a better state than it's ever been. There's more cash available than we've ever had in the history of mankind. Excuse me. But the challenge is, what do we do when those things happen? And that's usually the mistake that when things happen. And then typically what happens is, we want to focus on how do we get this sorted out as quickly as possible. Each one of those events took months and years just to happen. We're currently in a pandemic of COVID-19. It's almost 500 days since we had lockdown in South Africa, and it's still happening. The number of discussions, the type of discussions about how did this happen, why is it still happening, what people are doing about it, how this is wrong, how this is right, is unbelievable. I did an exercise yesterday before I finalized this talk, and I just entered COVID-19 into Google. 5,170 million results. And the interesting thing about Google is it doesn't give you an absolute number, it says about. So there were about 5,170 million articles, pages, something that contains content about COVID-19, this pandemic. The World Health Organization defines a pandemic as the outbreak of a disease globally. And this is where we are. It's a global thing. So the title of today's talk implies that focus is required to survive a pandemic, and specifically today's pandemic. And one could argue for and against it. So what I'm going to share with you today doesn't make it right or wrong. It's my views. When Pastor Q asked me to come and talk about this, I was very excited. But my biggest challenge was, it's either going to be very short or very long. So it took some time for me to just get my thoughts around, so what are the basic things that we need to survive a pandemic? Because as I said, in my 34 years of being in the working world, we've survived a number of massively disruptive things. We can argue whether COVID's worse, but that's not the point here. Because the question today is, what do we need to focus on? What do we focus on to survive something like this? When answering this, we need to understand that a pandemic, like the 4 events I just mentioned, is an interruption. It interrupts our lives. Yes, it also brings death, but every day brings death. But it interrupts the way that we live our lives every single day. So that's going to be my focus, is we need to understand that it interrupts what we already focus on, and it comes and goes. We will have another pandemic. There's no doubt about it. We will have another pandemic. Because that's the way that nature works. The thing about focus is that challenges arrive when we are not focusing before events like this happen. So we don't do the right things before. So when it happens, that's when we say, what am I going to do? And we go into panic mode. We go into things like panic buying. And we've seen panic buying. For those of you that are old enough, in 1994, in the history of South Africa, people believed that there was going to be civil war and all kinds of nightmare stuff. And we did crisis buying, panic buying. We didn't. And the reason my wife and I didn't is maybe we were naive at the time, but we also believed that God had a different plan for this country. And He did. Because even today, notwithstanding all the issues we have and what we've seen over the last couple of days, this country is in a better position than it ever was. Yes, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of challenges. But if you're out there today and you look at me and you say, David, you're talking nonsense, then I challenge you to come and get in my car, or get onto my motorbike with me, and go and drive through South Africa, and you'll see how it's different. But the problem is that we only focus when things happen. Like this week, we focus on what happened now. And a lot of people say to me, there's no hope, etc., etc. Really? Really? What are you focusing? Are you focusing on the stuff now? Or were you focusing yesterday, the week before, the month before already, on the right things? And the right things are the things that you need to focus on to help you to survive when things happen. We can argue that if I have a flat tire, it's a crisis. I'm surviving an event, because that's really what surviving means. So, what are the things that we should be focusing on? And the very first thing everybody would say is money. And I would argue you're right. But the problem is we need to focus on what we need and not what we want. And we need money. All of us need money. It doesn't matter who we are. We need money. And we need money to pay for the most basic needs in a time of crisis. When there's a disruption, when there's a pandemic, when there's a financial crisis, when I'm ill, I need money to be able to carry me through that period. So why do we need money? At its most basic, because remember the topic is about surviving a pandemic, the art of focus. So we're talking about survival here. How do I get through it? And when we say we talk about survival, we're talking about what are those absolute basic things that I need? And those absolute basic things consist of just a few things. Number one, shelter. I need protection against nature. Number two is I need food. I need water. I need electricity. Now, a lot of us can argue, no, you don't need electricity. Go without electricity for a month, and then you tell me again that you don't need electricity. We also need transport. We need medical help. We need to be able to communicate. And we need savings. We need savings. So, we should focus on what these needs will cost us in the future. But you can't do that in times of a pandemic. We need to focus on those things now so that I can plan for an event like that. The challenge is that people don't focus today. And because we don't focus today, when life happens, when there are interruptions to our daily lives, now we want to start focusing. And we want, like I said in the beginning, a quick formula to survive this event. That's not going to happen. So, we should focus on what we need. And the first thing we need is money. And we should focus on how much money we are going to need in the future. So looking at how much money I have today and saying, no, I'm well off today, you're lying to yourself. You are also being lazy. Because the art of focus is about discipline, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So you need to today determine how much money will I need in an event like this. That's what you need to do. But the problem comes in when we don't focus on what we need, but what we want. So, the interesting thing that we forget about money is that you need to do something to get money. You need to earn your money. So, in order to do something, you need to be healthy. That's the first thing. You need to be healthy. Because if you want money, you're going to have to do something. And there's a lot of things I want to repeat today, because we've learned through life that we need to repeat things, say it differently for people to hear it. Again, it doesn't make me right, but this is my opinion. So we need to focus on our health today. So, what do? When a pandemic like this hits, and remember, pandemic is about disease. It means people are going to fall ill. It means we need to go to a hospital. We need access to medication. We need access to hospitals. But if you don't have money, you can't do that. So one of the best ways, one of the most obvious ways, is to have a medical aid. So what do you need to focus on today? You need to focus on today that you can afford a medical aid, and that you spend your money on the stuff that allows you to afford you a medical aid. The public system is overrun. But the public system also gets overrun by people that should be able to know better, and that should have planned better. But they focused on the wrong things yesterday. So, the most basic medical aid you need is one that at least will cover your hospitalization. Not everybody needs medicine every day, every week, every month. We understand that. But when a pandemic happens like this, you should at least be able to put yourself in a position today that when it happens again in the future, you've catered for that. And especially if you have dependents. If you are taking care of your parents, or if your parents are taking care of you, if you are married, if you have children, husbands, wives, you have to make sure that you can cater for those people to be able to go to a hospital. That's a focus area today. Because you don't need a pandemic to go to a hospital. You just need a car accident. Or a pregnancy. Or you fall and break an arm. Or you just come down with pneumonia. You still need it. So focus on that today. The next thing is you need to be able to move around. You need to be able to get to the doctor. You need to be able to get to family members to help. You need to be able to go and buy food. So, in order to get to point one, from point one to point B, you should focus on having access to and being able to afford your transport. And it doesn't matter who you are, whether you use a taxi or a fancy expensive car. And there's nothing wrong with a fancy expensive car. But you need to cater today for you to be able to move around in the future. It's important, because how else do you get to the hospital when the system is overrun and an ambulance can't get to you? It's a simple thing, but we don't focus on those things today. And again, I remind you, it's about how do we survive a pandemic, not how do we comfortably cruise through it, because very few people will be able to comfortably cruise through it. So, in order to have access to transport, it could mean that you have your own car. And there are many people out there that have their own cars. But here's the thing about your own car. How many people buy a car either brand new, and they buy a motor plan with that, because there's a perception that the motor plan has to come with a car, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's your personal choice. But the point is, you buy, usually when you buy a new car, or if you buy a new car, there's a motor plan that comes with it, so that you can, on a regular basis, take the car to get maintained. That's why you do it. So, what if you don't buy a new car? What if you buy a second-hand car? Now you buy the second-hand car, but you need to make sure that you can afford to keep that car on the road. So you need insurance. But you need money to pay for the insurance. You need the insurance for in case it gets stolen or damaged in an accident. And the accident doesn't mean that you caused the accident. Somebody else drives into it. Remember what we said earlier. I fall, I break my arm, it's an accident. I need medical aid. I'm in a car. Somebody hits me from the side or from behind. Doesn't matter the reasons, but I need insurance to have it fixed so that I can get my family to where they need to be in a time of a pandemic. But you need to do that daily, weekly, monthly, year in, year out. In order to survive, you must make sure that you put the stuff in place for you to survive. So, insurance is one part of a car. The other part is you need to save money to maintain your car if it doesn't have a multiplier. And let's be honest, there's a lot of people out there that didn't buy new cars. Or they bought a new car and the motor plan expired. Now they don't have money to maintain the car. Maintenance, at its most basic level, take it in once a year, get it checked out, replace the tires when they need to, and fix the brakes when they need to. That's it. So you need to be able to get from point one to point B. And that doesn't happen in times of a pandemic. It happens now because we are setting ourselves up to survive in the future. The next thing is, it's fine to have medical aid, it's fine to have a car. But what happens when I can't communicate with people around me? So, gone are the days when it was a luxury to have a telephone. When I grew up, we had telephone lines, fixed lines. We still have those. Today, you have a choice. You can have a fixed line in your house, in your business. You can have a mobile. You can talk via data. You can have airtime. But the point is, you need it. But again, you need money for it. So today, you need to focus on being able to pay for communication when a pandemic hits us. You need to plan those things today. In order to do these things, we need to have savings in the bank account. We need to have money. When a pandemic hits, and guys, let's be honest, when, not if, when. If you're still living in a world where you say if, or when you say it's never going to happen to me, look at what's happening in the world today. Look at what's happening just to us over the last almost 500 days in South Africa. There are no ifs anymore. It's what do we do when it happens? How do I position myself today for when things happen? In business, every single business owner should have at least an expected scenario and an unexpected scenario when they plan. But we should do the same. In our day-to-day lives, we should do exactly the same. So the challenge comes in about what do I need to save for? Because let's be honest, you look at the stats, if you're a financial advisor, doesn't matter what it is. The stats are available out there. How many people save today? Now, people will say to me, David, but there's a lot of people that can't afford to save. The thing about saving is that it has very little to do with how much money you get. Because if you get little, you can save little. If you get a lot, you can save more. But the problem is, it's a mindset. All of us watching this today know people that live on the face of it fantastic lives. But we also know that they are almost dead, killed by debt. And then a pandemic hits. What do you do now? Because now suddenly, challenges are coming. So, how do we plan for this? How do we plan to save? Because remember, we need to focus on the stuff that'll get us through the pandemic. We need to survive the pandemic. So, reminder, shelter, food, water, clothing, electricity, transport, medical help, and communication. So what have we learned so far through this pandemic? Well, it's been going for almost 500 days. So I argue this morning with you guys that you should focus on having at least 12 months worth of savings in your bank account. Cash, or if it's not in cash, you must be able to take whatever you have and convert it into cash very quickly. But it must be set aside for that purpose. When things go wrong, when it happens. So, what do you need to do? You need to go and determine today how much money you will need to pay for shelter in the future. You need to go and determine how much you will need to pay for food, to pay for water, clothing, all of those things. And you need to do it for at least 12 months. Not 1 month, not 3 months, not 6 months. But that's my view. I do a personal cash forecast every month for 24 months. I don't want to get caught off guard were things that I could have planned and done myself. And a lot of the stuff that's happening to a lot of us today is because we didn't do the right things yesterday, last week, last month, last year, because we only looked at instant gratification. Instant gratification. That's what we looked at. And when the non-instant thing happened, we blamed. We blamed everybody. Today we even blame government. Could they have done things better? Blah, 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 blah. What have you done? It's easy to blame government. It's very easy to blame the doctors. To blame everybody except ourselves. Because they were caught off guard as much as you and I were caught off guard. The challenge is they are now lumped with that challenge. Because remember, when you and I vote, we don't abdicate our responsibility. All we do is we say, I vote for you to do things on my behalf. That's what we do. Voting is just about, I'm voting for you to take care of things on my behalf, and so that it gets better and better, like I would have done it myself. So now, this morning, when we compare ourselves individually against the complaints we have against government about how they've handled this pandemic, and again, I'm not coming up for government, I'm not saying what they did is right or wrong. I'm saying if you compare yourself against them, what would your rating be? Think about that for a second. How well did you do in preparing for this and then handling it? How well did you do? The challenge is we don't want to know that. We don't want to hear that. Because I hear what you say, David, but that's not my problem. It is your problem. Otherwise, you wouldn't be complaining about it. And if you say, no, I'm not complaining about it, fantastic. But nothing gives you the right this morning to blame anybody out there for the mistakes you made yesterday, last week, last month, last year. You have no right to do that. You can have an opinion. I have an opinion. What I'm sharing with you this morning is based on my experience, and as a result of that, it becomes my opinion. But how well did you do in terms of ensuring that your house was paid off after 20 years? How well did you do in terms of making sure that your car is in good condition to get your grandma to the hospital, or to go and buy food, or to get to work? How well did you take care of making sure that your medical aid was in place, that you saved money for that unforeseen event that's coming up? And just by the side, and I have to put this in there, for those of you out there that complain about paying tax, government gets its money through three forms: tax, borrowings from people like you and me, and borrowings from overseas people. Government doesn't print its own money, so when pandemics like this hit, the money that we paid into the tax account is used to help us out. So think about that. Did you cater for that? So, did you save? Now you might argue, or want to argue, that I'm suggesting that you should have at least a year's worth of income available as savings. And you would be almost right. I'm not saying have a year's income. I'm saying have a year's worth of expenses. Now, some of you can argue and say, oh, David, but my expenses just take my income. Well, go and look at the things that you need to survive, not what you want. The definition of surviving includes things like continuing to exist, remaining intact, and still living after the end of a situation or event. That's surviving. Nothing there is saying I'm sitting on my couch and I'm having a nice life, because we're all in this. This is not unique to South Africa. It's not unique to you and me. It's not unique to somebody that's either in a higher economic bracket or a lower, somebody that's got a job or not. It affects all of us. And it affects us equally. Equally. And we can argue that, and I'm happy to. But we don't have the time today. So, the definition of surviving includes continuing to exist, remaining intact, and still living after the end of a situation or event. And that implies it will end. And we all know it ends. So, we need to decide how we want to exist, remain intact, and live during any interruption, including a pandemic. So if you decide you want to live through and just not survive it, you will have to focus on getting all of these things in place. Otherwise, you're going to end up where you are now. So you're going to have to do something. You can, of course, decide rather to focus on what you want today. And let's look at that. When we look at the what we want and not what we need, we focus on things like, I will rather pay for junk food or takeaway food than buy my own food much cheaper and prepare it at night. Also with my family. So it's much cheaper and it's to the benefit of my family. So let me say that again. I will rather focus on buying junk food, and I might even use the excuse of, but David, I don't have time to prepare food. Really? But you have time to watch TV. You have that. And you have time to waste on other things, but you can't prepare food. Because for the same amount of time that you go there, buy the food, come home, blah, blah, all of the things, you could have prepared it. The what focuses on buying the car that I want today, as opposed to the future. So what do we typically do? We buy the car that is too expensive to maintain in the future. Because remember what I said, there's not a quick formula. You've got to do things now that takes you into the future. So you buy a car that's too expensive. You can't save. You can't afford insurance. So now when a pandemic hits, you've got a problem. What focuses on buying that cell phone or that cell phone contract that I can't afford in 12 months' time? Because I didn't do a cash flow forecast to see how things will increase. The what focuses on buying clothes that I shouldn't really buy, but I can buy it on credit, so I buy it on credit, but I don't need it. And I also buy the big brand. Now, I'm not knocking brands, but what I'm saying is if you buy on credit and after that you still can't save, well, the dictionary explains behavior like that as idiot. I'm not calling anybody an idiot this morning. I'm just telling you what the dictionary says. Focusing on the what, therefore, results in not having a medical aid, because now you don't have money. You've spent it on all these things. You don't have the money. And let me pause there again, guys, and remind you that this is about surviving something like this. Surviving it. Focusing on the what I want causes you to not be able to afford a medical aid. And because you can't afford a medical aid, you now put your employment at risk. And what happens when you put your employment at risk? You put your income at risk. And didn't I just say at the beginning that what we need is money to get us through this? We need money. Because money gets us and pays for the stuff that we need during a pandemic. So if you don't have a job because you didn't cater to keep yourself healthy by getting the right food, and you didn't put a medical aid in place so that in the event of you breaking your arm, you could still get assistance. And in the event of a pandemic, you could get medical attention. You are putting not only your money at risk, but the well-being of the family members around you. All those people that rely on you because of your selfish behavior. And that's what it is. Because that's what, when I focus on what I need, that becomes selfish. Now, I'm not saying for a second you shouldn't want things. There's a lot of stuff I want in life. What I'm saying is, we're talking about surviving something in the future, which means the needs and the wants need to be balanced off today to make sure that what I need will be there in the future. So want all of these things, by all means. If we don't have wants, if we haven't got dreams, what do we live for? So, by all means, go for those things. But you can't do the things today at the expense of stuff that you will need in the future. There's a lot of people in South Africa that experienced this. The pandemic came, and after a few months, your salary was cut. There's a lot of people that lost their jobs for the simple reason that businesses just didn't have the money to pay them. Because remember, in order to pay for something, it means I must get cash. So if a business doesn't get business from you and me because we are staying at home, then they can't pay their employees. So what happens? We retrench. So what happens now? Because I went for what I want, whether I got retrenched or I now work on a 50% salary, doesn't matter. But because yesterday, last week, last month, or last year, I focused on what I wanted at the time, and because I didn't look at the cost of those things in the future to see if I can still afford it, I have a problem today at the time and during a pandemic. Not government, not whoever you want to blame, you, me. Because yesterday, I didn't do the right thing. Because I didn't focus on what I need in my life to survive something like this in the future. Because I didn't save enough to be able to carry me through a period in time so that I could cater for that. I didn't do that. And because I didn't do that, I have a problem today. Not you, me. I have the problem today. Not government, I have the problem today. But it's because I chose in the past to be selfish. I chose not to focus on doing the right thing today. There's no art to focus. There's a choice. There's a choice. I choose today how what I do today will impact me first. Tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. When things happen. Because this we know, guys, it will happen. It will happen. We've seen it time and time again. The most fascinating thing about humans is that we struggle to learn from the past. We repeat things. And the interesting thing is, people say often to me, no, we don't repeat it. And then when we sit and we analyze, we realize, it's the same circumstances, it just presents differently. That's all it is. It just presents differently. And that's what we do. We ignore things in favor of what I want today. And then I blame. And I said to you guys at the beginning, I'm going to repeat a lot of things. We blame, but we don't take responsibility. We abdicate our responsibility. We abdicate that. To survive an interruption, because it is an interruption, it's not lifelong, it is an interruption. We need to focus on what we do daily when things are going well. That's what we need to do. We need to focus today. I am an outspoken Christian. And I believe one thing. In the beginning of the Bible, in the first chapter of the Bible, it says that God made man and woman to his image. To do what? To rule this world. So God made you and me to rule. As a Christian, that's what I believe. I'm convinced of it. But here's the challenge. We abdicate. We abdicate the responsibility to rule. That's what we do. On a day-to-day basis, I will live my life the way I want to, and you live your way, or your life the way you want to. And in the process, I abdicate my responsibility towards you and me. And it should start with me first. Because the Bible also teaches us that God says, allow me to let your cup overflow. And in a time of pandemic, I need money for my cup to overflow. But the problem is, we don't let our own cups overflow. We don't allow ourselves to have enough money in the bank to carry us through something in the future. We spend it now. We are selfish. And there's no other way to describe it. And I'm not here this morning to be popular. I was asked to share my views with you on how to survive a pandemic, the art of focus. And in summary, there is no art to focus. There's a choice to make decisions. And we make those decisions every single day. We make those decisions every time we are faced with something. Every time we are faced with something, we need to make a decision. It needs to become a way of life. If it doesn't become a way of life, we will not survive. Because what we've seen now will get worse in the future. That's all that's going to happen. It's going to get worse. Why? Because if we stay where we are today and we hope for the best in the future, our starting point is here. So we've got less now than what we did yesterday. There are many people out there that currently have a lot of money. And they will continue to have a lot of money because they have learned the art of focus. They have learned to focus on the stuff that they will need in the future. You will hear these people talk about, I want to do that. I want to do that. I'm going to do this. And that's why I do what I do today. There's a direct link between it. There's a direct link between what they want for the future and what they do today. There is zero link between coming home in the evenings and sitting behind or on your couch in front of your TV and being lazy. There is no link between buying stuff and paying for whatever it is that you are paying for. And don't get me wrong, guys. I'm not saying that don't do it. I'm saying there's no link between having those things, but future success, or with future success, future survival rates, when you don't have money in your account today. When you haven't equipped yourself with the ability to help you to survive in the future. It doesn't matter how we argue that. It doesn't matter how we spin that. You, not your employer. You, not your wife, not your husband, not your children, and definitely not the government needs to make the decision. You need to make the decision. I need to make the decision. And I need to make it today. Now. Not tomorrow. We can't delay. I close off with this. And I'm repeating it. To survive an interruption, like a pandemic, we need to focus on what we do daily. What are you going to do today to set you up just for tomorrow? Just for tomorrow. What are you going to do today that allow you to be better just tomorrow? And that question is a lot more difficult to answer than what you think. Because it means you're going to have to change. So we focus on the future by making sure you and I do the things today that we need to do. And the first thing we need to do is change our mindsets. Thank you very much.